Hey everybody, welcome. It's Lotus, Art of Sacred Embodiment. We're going to talk a little bit more today about relationship, moving towards divine union. So moving towards divine union. As I've said before, coming into our divinity is a process in and of itself. And so we're moving towards that. And we move towards that through karmic relationships, conscious relationships, sacred partnerships into divine union. And and I want to talk a little bit about karmic obligation paradigm. What do I mean by that? So first I want to say this is really for those of you who are called, and because it's in your blueprint, to higher love relationships, allowing relationship to be your path of evolution or a big part of your path of evolution, where relationship grows us and evolves us towards our divinity. Um, so the old paradigm, when we're looking at relationship, and we're just going to say karmic relationships. Karmic relationships can be great and fabulous and wonderful, but they're still going to hold certain expressions that are still working with a karmic construct, meaning there's still things that are being worked out, or people choose to stay together in a relationship based on karma that is not being resolved. And that's part of the obligation piece of this. When we listen to wedding vows in the past, right, there till death do us part. And we don't hear in there anything about whether we're going to be happy, whether we're actually a right fit for each other, whether we're going to outgrow one another. So there's this overarching, expectation. And then it's also been called a sin in the past. We can't forget that. Divorce is a sin or a failure, right? That one or both or the marriage has been a failure. This weighs people down with a lot of shame and guilt. And it keeps the construct of staying in a box based on living from the outside in, meaning living from values and morals that that are unrealistic in the way that they have been implemented in our consciousness. All right. Um, they are they're not accurate within the way that they have been um, embodied by us. So when we're in relationships that have obligation construct to it, or expectation, or fear, right? Fear of failure, fear of becoming something less than, which is this illusion and lie that has been, propagated for centuries. When we're in an obligation, we are actually um, we're selling ourselves short and the other person short. If we are in a relationship or marriage because we should be, because, even if it's the right thing to do, we want to really dissect some of these messages. We're not going to dissect all of that right here. That's what I do in couples work if I'm working with couples, privately, because every person's dissection is going to be very personal and important to them, right? So so when we're living by these external rules, we're not allowed to actually know ourselves more fully. We aren't actually allowed then to open ourselves up to the love that we actually are. We might actually have love for the person that we're with, and yet it may not really be the right fit for a romantic, intimate relationship. Now, some people might find that that works fine for them, or they find ways around that to work with. That maybe that friendship is the most important thing, right? That's how they're oriented. That's that is a path. That is, that's fine. But what I'm talking about is when, because there is this obligation or this expectation, there's then lying, deceit, infidelity. There's resentment that builds up towards the other or towards self. There is, maybe doing the right thing for the kids, and yet the kids then are not witnessing or being modeled a relationship that is healthy and whole, where both people, the parents are holding a container of harmonious and beautiful love expressions, and communication, and conflict resolution, and all of that. Instead, maybe they're being modeled withholding, silence, resentment, no affection. And these things then, is that really the right thing? And what is right about that, right? Because it's always distressing when parents separate or divorce, and yet there can be short-term distress that can be worked with and remedied, or there can be long-term conditioned reality that may, you know, go unnoticed, but then a life is sort of kept dim. The next life and the next life, right? The generations to come. So that obligation, this is, when there's unresolved issues, when there are patterns that are saying we have to stay in this because this is all we have and it's fine. What more is there? True love is a lie, right? Yeah, that's an illusion, right? Because there's been a jadedness that's taken place. That jadedness comes from disappointments and a life not fully given expression. What we want to start doing as we move into more conscious relationships is to recognize that these karmic patterns can be resolved. We want them to be resolved. They need to actually be resolved for evolution, for growth, for health, for vitality, for a sense of wholeness. But we have to break away from those obligations, or at least be willing to say, yeah, this is why I'm here. I'm not actually here. We aren't actually here because there's a deep devotional connection to a life together that is fulfilling. We're here because we feel stuck and it feels too hard and scary to move away from that. I just watched this movie recently called The Millers in Marriage. And what I thought was interesting, what I kind of appreciated was, it was three couples, three siblings in their relationships around my age. And this sense of how hard it feels as we get older, right, to make a change. How, once you hit a certain age, for some people, maybe it's your 40s, maybe it's your 50s, maybe it's your 60s, maybe it's your 70s, maybe you don't hit that, which is awesome. Where we start to realize I'm too old, right? I don't want to get back out there. I would rather sit and suffer quietly or suffer within a relationship that doesn't work for either person, where neither person is happy. Because, right, if one person is really unhappy, the reality is the other person is not happy either. I mean, you're not going to have that unless somebody is really in denial, because we're energetically communicating all the time. Energy speaks louder than the words that we speak to another person. It's in the touch or the lack thereof, or the cold touch, or the distance, or the comfort in the distance. So in karmic situations, we become comfortable in the discomfort. We become comfortable or acquiescing to the things that we don't think are going to be resolved. And we don't want to go through the discomfort of resolving them, of the conversations, of the new decisions, of facing choices, of hurting another or feeling hurt. But as we shift into living consciously, we set ourselves free and we set the other free. Right? So we either hold each other in chains or we set each other free. And we start exploring. We start truth telling. We start asking those hard questions. We start, exploring together other options. And we know that we can go through the pain and the discomfort and the loss, because whether you've been with somebody for 10 years and it's been fabulous and you decide to separate consciously, there's going to be loss, there's going to be grief, there's going to be mourning. Or you've been with somebody 20 years, not very happy, and you decide there's going to be a different kind of loss and pain and suffering in that revealing of, wow, we haven't been happy. It's not that we don't love the other person or like the other person. We've just grown in different directions, perhaps, or outgrown, or there's other circumstances going on. There's deeper karmic issues going on that are dishonesty, infidelity, um, you know, um, emotional infidelity, other habits, addictions, other things that we do, right? Things, stuff, or we've got that sweet dog, that's the focus of our bond, or the kids are the focus of the bond. And then these things go away, and then we're left with this gap. So conscious relationships, we take a look at the gap. We become courageous because it takes courage to look at the gap. And then we begin to be really clear with ourselves first, with our truths. And then we begin to be open to listen to the truths of the other. And we start dismantling the obligation, the expectations of society, of families, right? Of what will people think? Our own beliefs or fears of failure. And we start teasing all of that apart. And as we do that, and as we look at those things, they start to dissipate because we see that they weren't really true to begin with. They were lies, in essence. They were illusions. They were programming and conditioning that may have worked at another point in time, but they are not working now. This is not what we're doing now. We are now, no matter what age that we are, and I totally get that, being, 60 and single, and fortunately I have a beautiful relationship, a sacred I had a sacred partnership with my ex-husband. I have the fortune of having, almost three, definitely my ex-husband and my ex-partner before that, two really amazing sacred partnerships that the friendship that was always there has been sustained. But that is not, the more deep, intimate, romantic, devotional relationship that's moving us into our divine connection. And we don't get into that deep peace and love and freedom of even sacred partnerships if we aren't willing to look and stir the pot and remedy what can be remedied, or make the recognition that it's time. And doing that as we get older, it is more challenging. And yet, right, it's all in the mindset, because we're always growing and evolving. And so being single has allowed me amazing growth and evolution that continues to prepare me for my next partnership, which will be highly aligned, right? And moving towards divine union, because that's where I'm at in my evolution. That's the work that I've done up until this point. So as we move into these new constructs, we have to be willing to up level our own inner experience, right? Not what the outer world says. I've said this before, I'll say it again because it is the foundation. Self-love. How do I speak to myself? How do I hold myself? How do I honor myself? How do I respect myself? These qualities are going to determine the consciousness and who we attract and who we are attracted to when we come into next expressions of partnership. And we can do this work within an existing relationship as well. But it takes both people really willing to be radically honest, radically open with themselves and with the other. There is not obligation as we evolve into different stages of partnership. We grow more and more into the ability to hold and maintain unconditional love. We be able to hold and maintain each person being able to self-source, meaning we aren't there fixing or saving or trying to make somebody else happy. That isn't the job of these next levels of relationship. We learn how to do these things within our own being. And it doesn't mean that we don't have needs. I call these actually holy needs. And I'll do a different video on that because this can get kind of tricky, right? Well, how am I supposed to be completely self-sourcing? And what about, being able to count on my partner or talk to my partner about needs? That's the whole different game when we are in these new paradigms, because they aren't going to be obligatory or expectation based. They are freely given and graciously received. And that is a very nuanced dance that happens within oneself and the partnership. So I'm going to stop from here. So at this point, so we're moving from obligation and expectation, right, into greater freedom of choice and an interdependent way of operating. We are choosing each other day by day, moment by moment sometimes. Yeah, it's a choice. We aren't obligated to stay. It's a choice to cultivate that relationship, that higher expression of partnership through clear and devotional interaction and cultivating higher truths in support of the highest good for both, right? We want the person that we love to be happy. So just feel that. Even if that means they're happy moving on. Why? Because if they're with us and they're not happy, that's not fair. It's not fair to either. Right? So we want to cultivate this understanding that we love our person and we want their happiness as much as we want our own happiness. Ideally, we want that together. And if that isn't possible, then we open up the field for different options. All right, that is where I'm going to leave it. I hope this was helpful, and also check back in the history because there are other relationship videos. I'll probably just keep adding them to the playlist. There is a playlist that already has 3 of these, and I think I'll just add these to them so that they all streamline for those that are, that are in this alignment of learning and growth through partnership. All right, much love.